touching down in Germany. As President Trump prepares for his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, he vows to confront new forms of aggression in the West.
We will confront them. We will win.
Charlie Gard will talk to a top Vatican official under fire for his statement on the terminally ill infant. Remembering Joaquin NavarroValls, we look back on his relationship with Pope John Paul II, plus the one tip he had for the man who has his job now.
The advice really that I understood from him was more personal than professional.
And raising their voices. We'll introduce you to a group of priests and seminarians topping the charts on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 6, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump says North Korea is behaving in a very, very dangerous manner, and he's considering, quote, very severe things to respond to their test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. The remarks came during the president's visit to Warsaw, Poland. Correspondent Mark Irons is following the president's trip from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump is on his second overseas trip. He's vowing to confront new forms of aggression targeting the West. He's also calling on Russia to stop provoking unrest around the world. All this ahead of the G20 summit in Germany. President Trump ending his day in Hamburg, greeted by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Before arriving in Germany, President Trump visited Warsaw's Krasinski Square in Poland. It's the site of the uprising against Nazi occupation. Mr. Trump told thousands of Poles gathered there that the country's triumph over hardship is a model for the future.
Just as Poland could not be broken, I declare today for the world to hear that the West will never, ever be broken. Our values will prevail, our people will thrive, and our civilization will triumph.
On the eve of his first meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the president called for Moscow to stop fomenting unrest around the world.
We urge Russia to cease its destabilizing activities in Ukraine and elsewhere, and its support for hostile regimes, including Syria and Iran.
In Poland, a country with deep Catholic roots, many people admire Trump. Some say they like the way he tries to preserve national traditions and protect borders.
This is a very good experience for us, for people from Poland and from Europe, because Donald Trump say very grateful and very good word to us. And his visit is most important to our future policy of Europe.
Others were impressed at how well the president seemed to know Polish history.
Great energy, a lot of Poland in the speech, not all about America. I really liked it.
The president dined this evening with President Moon of South Korea and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan. North Korea's provocative actions sure to have been a main topic of discussion. And tomorrow, the president will meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time at the G20 summit. Wyatt.
Mark, I understand President Trump expressed his commitment to Europe and NATO today?
That's right. Today, President Trump praised Poland for keeping its commitments to NATO. President Trump also says he backs a NATO provision requiring the U.S. to defend allies if they come under attack. Wyatt.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thanks, Mark. Poland has a population of about 38 million, and more than 90% of Poles are Catholic. It's also the birthplace of St. John Paul II. Ivo Bender, a native Pole who works for EWTN in East and Central Europe, joins us via Skype from Warsaw, Poland. Ivo, in one of his speeches, President Trump referenced Pope John Paul II's historic visit to his homeland in 1979. The president said together with Pope John Paul II, the Poles reasserted their identity as a nation devoted to God. How was his speech received, and how was Trump viewed generally in Poland?
Well, I think the speech was received generally very well, and especially this reference to this historic speech of John Paul II on the 2nd of June 1979, when he literally summoned the Holy Spirit to renew the earth, and then he added this earth. And this was really the moment from which we can count the fall of communism, because a year later, Solidarity was on strike and the Soviet Union began to crumble. So in general, I think the speech was received extremely well, especially because of the very thoughtful ideas of the president and referencing of the Polish history, but also the importance of defending our Western values.
Jewish leaders in Poland are expressing disappointment, though, that President Trump didn't include a stop in the Warsaw Ghetto. Will that hurt relations with the Jewish community?
I know that Ivanka Trump visited the monument of the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto and the Pauline Museum of the History of Polish Jews, along with the Chief Rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Shudrich. So I hope no such consequences will be there.
Can you give us a snapshot of the climate in Poland when it comes to important issues like the sanctity of life and marriage?
Poland has one of the best laws defending life in Europe, and abortion is outlawed except for just a handful of cases such as rape, incest, or deadly threat to the mother. In terms of marriage, marriage is defined in the Polish law as a union between one man and one woman. And I do not know of any significant political forces in Poland that are currently trying to challenge that.
How do Poles feel about President Trump visiting their country right before meeting with President Putin of Russia?
Well, I think it is important to remember whom we're dealing with and a certain continuity vis-a-vis Russia. When Kennedy appeared weak, when he was meeting Khrushchev for the first time, Khrushchev placed missiles in Cuba. So it's important to make a certain stance before the American president has a first meeting with the leader of Russia.
Well, it's so interesting to hear the Polish perspective on some of these important issues. Ivo Bender, manager of East and Central Europe for EWTN. Thanks so much for telling us about it.
Thank you very much.
Hundreds of anti-G20 protesters clashed with police forces in Hamburg today. Police fired tear gas and water cannons while protesters hurled bottles and stones at them. More than 100,000 protesters are expected for the two-day summit. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is back in the intensive care unit at a Washington, D.C. hospital. He was the congressman most seriously hurt in last month's shooting at a baseball field in Virginia. He's listed in serious condition due to a possible infection. The suspect in the June 14th shooting was killed by police at the scene. A strong earthquake shakes the central Philippines, killing at least 2 people. At least 100 others were injured. A 6.5 magnitude quake struck in the Leyte province of the Philippines. The earthquake destroyed 1 building and damaged others. The Philippines sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where earthquakes and volcanoes are more common. Pro-government militias stormed Venezuela's Congress building and injure at least 5 lawmakers. The attack happened yesterday during a special session coinciding with the country's Independence Day. One of the lawmakers had to be taken to the hospital on a stretcher. The attack comes amid 3 months of violent confrontations between security forces and protesters who accuse the government of trying to establish a dictatorship. Pro-life leaders joined together in Washington, D.C. to defend the rights of a terminally ill child and his parents. They want the British government to help 11-month-old Charlie Gard, who has a rare genetic disease. Gard's parents want to bring him to the U.S. for treatment, but a London hospital said no, and a U.K. court sided with the hospital. Susan B. Anthony List president Marjorie Dannenfelser tells us this shouldn't be about who is in charge of Charlie. The answer is simple.
And I think you don't have to have an ethics degree or a law degree. You just have to have lived, and you have to have a heart to understand that his parents are the ones who make the decision about life and death for him.
This week, President Trump voiced his support for Charlie and his parents, saying if we can help little Charlie Gard, as per our friends in the UK and the Pope, we would be delighted to do so. The president isn't the only one speaking out about Charlie Gard. Pope Francis is calling for his parents to be allowed to accompany and treat their child until the end. But a statement from another Vatican official is causing some controversy. Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia is the president of the Pontifical Academy for Life, founded by John Paul II to defend and promote human life. Your Excellency, in a statement last week, you said the interests of the patient must be paramount, but you added we must also accept the limits of medicine. So are you standing by the court's decision to take Charlie Gard off life support?
Yes, when the case of little Charlie exploded, the first action as a president of Pontifical Council for Life that I took was to listen to the English bishops who were familiar with the case. Together, we prepared a document in which we ensured the principles with which to judge a situation of such complex nature. No euthanasia, no abandon, no extraordinary measure. Yes, to cure, to accompany, to listen to the desires of Charlie parents.
This week, the Vatican said Pope Francis expressed his own closeness to Charlie's parents and that he's hoping their desire for care is not ignored. That seemed to almost be a reversal in the Vatican's position. Have you talked with Pope Francis about the case?
No, I have not been in contact with the Pope during these days, but I can affirm that the Pontifical Academy for Life has worked in strict agreement with the Pope's staff. The Pope's statement and the Academy's statement address different aspects of the same question. The Academy first presented the applicable general principles, and the Pope then emphasized one of them, that is, the relationship between the patient and his parents, medical personnel, and all who are close to him. It appears that this relationship risks being set aside by the civil authorities in Charlie's case.
Some people are concerned the statement, though, just wasn't sensitive enough to the rights of parents. What would you say to the critics out there?
So the Pope, the Vatican, and all of us must pray for Charlie and its parents. Together we must be vigilant that the rights of Charlie and those of all children are recognized and defended. All human life is sacred and was given to us as a precious and fundamental gift. This is very, very important.
It is an important issue, and obviously continued importance of prayer is also important. Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, President of the Pontifical Academy for Life, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
The president of the March for Life is expressing support for Charlie Gard and his parents. Jeanne Mancini joins us now in studio. Jeanne, welcome back to the program. You gathered alongside other pro-life leaders today to voice support for Charlie Gard's parents. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, if you consider what's really going on here, Charlie has this terrible, potentially terminal illness, which is horrific to begin with and tragic, but what makes this so much worse is that his parents are not now allowed to decide how to treat him. So we're hoping and praying that the UK will consider maybe changing him to another hospital in the UK. We understand that the judgment that came down from the European Parliament has some wiggle room, and that the attorney that's actually at this particular hospital, it's the Grand Ormond Street Hospital, has sort of interpreted this in a very, small way. And so we're hoping that at the very least he could be potentially moved to a different hospital and his parents could exercise their freedom of will in deciding how to treat him.
Okay, that makes sense. So a lot of pro-life leaders on board with Charlie's parents. In addition, this week you attended a meeting with Vice President Pence at the White House alongside other pro-life leaders. Tell us a little bit about that meeting.
Sure. And in light of even the Charlie Gard situation, it's important that as we're talking about health care that we consider these most important questions. When does life begin? Who should be able to treat when life ends? What have you? So, of course, we talked about pro-life issues with Vice President Pence and wanting to keep the repeal and replace bill as pro-life as it possibly can be. And of course, we're all on the exact same page. It's just trying to figure out how to exactly to do that now.
It seems like the Trump administration is actively engaging with the pro-life movement. Do you have that same sense?
Oh, without a doubt. They've been just incredible, more pro-life than I ever could have anticipated. Not only keeping promises, but going even further, I would say.
It's an interesting article in a digital magazine, Refinery 29, which published an article about the changing face of the pro-life movement, talking about the growing influence of young women. Tell me, how have you seen the movement change over the years?
Well, I remember CNN running a piece a few years ago saying, you know, the March for Life is not your grandma's march anymore, something like that. And I would say that about the pro-life movement. I mean, it's kind of hip, young, trendy. And the young women, I mean, even at the press conference today, the young women primarily that are speaking or that are there in support of these issues are so smart and so articulate and so beautiful, and they've got such a fun kind of perspective on things. And so that article really captured that beautifully.
And like I said, they're not afraid at all to speak out that they are pro-life.
Right.
Jeanne Mancini, president of the March for Life. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Coming up, lasting legacy.
I would say defending the faith, but not in a defensive way.
We remember Joaquin NavarroValls, John Paul II's spokesman. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Joaquin NavarroValls is being remembered today for his close relationship with Pope John Paul II and for helping to lead a quiet revolution at the Vatican. The former papal spokesman died yesterday after a long illness.
He was a journalist, yes, but also, you know, he was a churchman. We knew that, and we appreciated it.
Joaquin NavarroValls was the first journalist to become chief Vatican spokesman, a post he served for more than 2 decades. Mario Biasetti is executive producer of Fox News in Rome and worked with Navarro while covering the Vatican. Biasetti spoke to EWTN about Navarro's love for his job and the church.
He made sure that always what he did, what he said, was in conjunction with the doctrine of the faith.
Navarro was fiercely loyal to St. John Paul II. He accompanied the Polish Pope on most of his 104 international trips. Known for his coolness and restraint, Navarro nearly broke into tears when John Paul was dying in April 2005.
E pertanto sono gravissime. Dall'alba di oggi, questa mattina,
he also announced the death of the now saint.
The Holy Father, John Paul II, died this evening at 9:37 in his private apartment.
In an interview with EWTN shortly before John Paul's canonization, Navarro told us what he thought when he found out his former boss would become a saint.
My reaction was to tell him, once again, thank you, John Paul II, for the masterpiece that you made of your life and that those of us who were close to you were able to see.
After John Paul died, Navarro remained as spokesman for 15 months with the new pope, Benedict XVI. The medical doctor turned journalist passed away yesterday after a battle with pancreatic cancer. He was remembered today at a church in Rome. Joaquin NavarroValls was 80 years old. Father Federico Lombardi, a Jesuit, replaced Navarro in 2006. Lombardi retired last year. Greg Burke, an American journalist, is now the head of the Vatican press office. We're happy now to welcome Greg Burke to the program, coming to us from Rome. Greg, before working for the Vatican, you covered the beat for Fox News and Time Magazine. You worked closely with Joaquin NavarroValls. What are some of your memories of him?
I think I remember Wyatt specifically a couple moments. One was 1994 with the UN conference in Cairo on population. And Navarro really taking a role which was much more than a spokesman. It was really almost a Vatican diplomatic role in that. I'd say really a lead role in what was really a clash of worldviews. And it was interesting to see him take that forward, I would say defending the faith, but not in a defensive way. He was really sort of leading the fight there, and it made a difference.
Can you tell us about the relationship he had with Pope John Paul II?
Well, it was clearly a really close relationship. Another thing I remember, and I guess the moment when I got to know NavarroValls a little better was when Time Magazine made John Paul II Man of the Year. So we were negotiating a lot of different things. We wanted an interview. In the end, there was no interview. But there was a moment where a number of the editors came through from New York to meet John Paul II, and standing up after an audience, it was just them. And the Pope talking, and it was interesting. You could tell they had a very, very good relationship there. I tweeted out yesterday a photo of the Pope and John Paul II smiling together, saying, Navarro, keep smiling. But I actually took that quote from John Paul II from that day, because as it was ending up, this little meeting with the editors, Navarro was off to the side, but obviously pretty happy at how things had gone. And John Paul looked at him and said in English, "Keep smiling."
When you joined the Vatican, did Navarro give you any advice?
He did. He basically, it was funny though, because it was less professional. You know, times had obviously changed from when I came and from when he had started. I remember telling him one day, you know, I said, when you started here, the leading technology was a fax machine, and now people are asking, what's a fax? Now, to his credit, he lived through the fax to the age of the internet. But the advice really that I understood from him was more personal than professional. It's like, don't neglect your interior life. Make sure you pray. You'll need it in this job.
Good idea. Prayer is always important. Greg Burke, Director of the Holy See Press Office, thanks so much for telling us about Navarro.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Up next, Gregorian chant. How a small-town seminary rose to the top of the music charts. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Lawmakers in Oregon approve a bill requiring insurance companies to cover abortions for free. The state already has some of the most liberal laws regarding the killing of innocent human life in the country. The measure does offer some religious-based exemptions to churches and other religious nonprofits. The governor of Virginia faces pressure to halt tonight's scheduled execution. 35-year-old William Morva received the death sentence for killing a hospital security guard and a sheriff's deputy. His attorneys say his crimes were the result of a severe mental illness that makes it impossible for him to distinguish between delusion and reality. A human rights group in Pakistan says that country has become one of the world's leading executioners. The Justice Project Pakistan says only China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq rank higher. Pakistan has already executed 44 people this year. The country halted executions in 2008, but reinstated the death penalty about 6 years later after militants killed a group of children. Hobby Lobby has been hit with a big fine from the federal government for illegal smuggling. The arts and crafts chain agreed to pay a $3 million fine and forfeit thousands of ancient Iraqi religious artifacts smuggled from the Middle East. The conservative Christian company says it has been acquiring a variety of historical Bibles and other artifacts since 2009. The family that owns the company is behind a new Bible museum opening in Washington, D.C. later this year. And finally tonight, Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary in Denton, Nebraska has a new claim to fame. It produced one of the best-selling classical albums on Amazon and iTunes, centered on Gregorian chant. Dozens of young men clad in priestly garments watch two of their brothers begin a chant.
Gregorian chant is a very ancient form of music. And there's something transcendent, I find, about the music. It's very peaceful and very calming and very conducive, it seems, to prayer.
The ancient Latin wouldn't have felt out of place in a European monastery hundreds of years ago.
This music, more or less, is the same sound, the same melodies that someone would have heard even 1,000 years ago at the death of a loved one, this requiem, which is the funeral mass.
The chant is integral to the seminary's daily routine.
One of the goals of this type of music is that we all sing as one voice. We sit next to each other, and one voice should never overpower another, but it should all be part of one common sound. It's a beautiful prayer where we're begging God to free us from the consequences of our sin. It's a prayer from the very bottom of your heart, and you hear this come out in the music. Libera me Domine, so free me, O Lord.
The singers are members of the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, a Catholic order formed in 1988 that focuses on traditional pre-Vatican II liturgy and sung prayers. And we thank you for watching EWTN tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Good night, and God bless.